Thank you, Connie. Okay, so we're here to unpack this. The heavens declare the glory of God. Now, specifically, what we're going to talk about is when, where, and how did God create the universe? I'm sorry, Connie, I'm gonna move out this way a little. If you turn, no need to restart it. Thank you very much. I need to be able to see it myself, I think is what it is. When, where, and how did God create the universe, the earth, and humanity? Okay. I'm in a program that teaches me to be something of a theologian, but I'm in a course that teaches me to at least communicate with scientists and data scientists and so forth, okay? And so I'm being forced into their language here. So we have a thesis, okay? We have a theorem, an idea that we're going to kick the tires on tonight, okay? And that is, and this is you may disagree, but my position is that Christians must be prepared to discuss not only who created the universe, the earth, and humanity, but why, when, and how he did so. Does that make sense? I don't know about you, I have in the past been content to say, God did it, enough said. And there's truth in that. Okay? That is all you need. But if you're really going to try to change hearts and minds, especially those that have either are analytical or really deep critical thinkers that get more philosophical than you might, or if you're those students and young adults coming out of education systems that are filled with teachers like that, okay, that have had their attention for years, okay, we've got to at least, to some degree, match their talk, okay? We've got to speak their language and talk on their standards, okay, and meet the criteria that they use when they think and communicate. If we don't, you might win an argument, but you are not going to convince a harder soul or mind, right? Okay, so what we're going to do is, I don't know if you ever heard of the 5 W's, who, what, when, where, why, how. Okay, and of course how is not a W, and there's not 5 with the how, but the how is important, okay? We're going to talk about these 5 W's, these 6 things of creation, okay, and the creation storyline. But we're going to set some of them aside. Can we all assume, I think I know the room, are we all in agreement that God created the universe?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, we may even be in agreement that God the Son created the universe.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to spend time there, okay? So that's something we can just move on from that. Another thing is, we are talking about I'm just telling you, we're talking about the 5 other W's of what was the origin of the universe, the earth, and humanity, okay? And we're also going to set aside the why. Can we all agree that he did it for his glory? Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thank you. So what we're going to do instead, and those might be, I think those are the more important 3. But the other 3 are also important, and they're necessary to have these conversations we're going to have with these people. And they are on these 3 questions that we are going to discuss tonight. When did he do so? How long ago, and how long did it take? Where? That may seem like a silly thing. Well, it's the universe, right? But not so fast. We'll talk briefly about that. And then how did he do it? Okay? So let's just get to that. Any questions so far? That was the right answer. Okay, and so what we're going to do, we're going to look at this slide at the very end. These are our learning objectives, okay? These are the things that I'd like you to be prepared to do when you leave here, whether you were when you got here, okay? You're going to be able to list some theories of how and when the universe and earth and humanity originated. Notice I didn't say created. This is how they talk. And it's cool, we don't disagree with that, do we? It doesn't tell a complete story, but it's accurate. Okay. Notice I said list some. I didn't say explain all. Okay. We're not setting you up to have to do anything impossible here. Okay, the second is be prepared to list some principles and terminology used in comparison of scriptural and natural evidence. Two kinds of evidence. And then be prepared to share your current thoughts on those topics. Okay, this is what I'd like to accomplish over the next half hour with you. Okay, first some terminology. Scientists talk about when they're doing research, when they're doing testing and experimentation and so forth, they're making observations to collect data, to create theories to test. They talk about observability. Okay? Can you see the thing? Okay? Whether it's an event or an object or a behavior, whatever it is, can you observe it or not? If you can't observe it, you can't test it. You can't test an assumption or a theory or a thesis based on that observed evidence. Okay? Provability. Remember this one. This will help you. Science doesn't prove anything. Ever. It predicts things. Okay? It doesn't say the next time X occurs, Y will be the result. It doesn't say that with absolute certainty. It never does. Anyone who says it does, which we all and they all slip and say that, prove it. It's not possible. Okay? What we do instead is we say, well, the last 1,000,000 times I did that, this happened. It's really likely that it'll happen next time, but it's only a probability. Bear that in mind. A lot of people honestly don't know that. I didn't know that a month ago. Okay, maybe I did, but hadn't thought about it. Okay, direct and indirect evidence. Okay? Can you observe something? Okay? Can you observe, am I observing right now that it's raining outside? No, not at this moment. Okay? Because I'm not looking out a window. Okay? But I can hear something on the roof that sounds like rain. It could be a mouse or squirrel. Huh?
A really big one.
A really big mouse, yeah. Squirrel is what I meant to say. Yeah, a rodent. Okay, so we're going to talk about direct and indirect evidence. Okay, that's going to be useful because we're going to be talking about indirect evidence that God did whatever, even though we couldn't observe him doing it. It is not observable. Okay, but there's lots of indirect evidence of it. Okay, and indirect evidence is more acceptable to scientists more often than you think. Okay, we're going to talk about the physical and metaphysical realms. Okay, physical is stuff you can sense. Your 5 senses can detect it. The metaphysical is things you can't, and it's not necessarily supernatural. I cannot detect your thoughts. Okay? So, therefore, your thoughts, your emotions are metaphysical. There may be physical evidence of them. Okay? Open, closed, and isolated systems. This is tricky, but don't worry about it. A system is open when it can exchange matter or energy with something external to it. Okay? So I've got, and this is blue food coloring, so Tanya's going to come, well, at least part of the carpet's blue already. I didn't think this through clearly, but let's go for it anyway.
Do you need like an eyedropper or something?
No, don't worry. This is an open system. Okay? Can matter go in it? Come out? Can energy affect it from outside? Might, I don't know how in this case, but might energy come out of it?
Yeah, because if it's hot, then the heat energy will come
Maybe
out.
if I had gasoline instead of colored water, right? Energy would come out of it, okay? Now, so that was an open system. This, I'm going to burp it so I don't spill it all over. There we go. Now I have a closed system. Matter, assuming the seal's good, I'm not going to test it. Matter cannot enter or leave this thing, right? Now, let's just say that was absolutely true, that this lid is not coming off, it's super glued on. That would be an example of a closed system. Then there's isolated systems. Okay, even though a closed system, even though matter can't come and go, energy can. I could heat this, blah blah. Okay. An isolated system, energy can't be transmitted back and forth either. Okay? So that's going to be important. Okay? Transcendent and non-transcendent events. A transcendent event is where something goes in or out of the system. If the system is the physical universe, for example, okay, and that's the one that we're talking about, okay, then a non-transcendent thing is something, it's just a cause and effect that happens, you know, you stub your toe, there's pain, blah, blah, that's non-transcendent, okay? If something outside the physical realm, something metaphysical caused it, then that would be a transcendent thing, okay? God acting, miracles, okay? We say. I'd like to unpack that more, but I know I'm going long here. Then there's the scriptural and natural records. Okay, we know the scriptural record is the Bible. Okay, and then there's the natural record. We see fossil fuel in the ground. We see heat coming from the sun, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's the natural record. Okay. And there are there's a confession out there, the Belgique confession, I think it's in about the 1500s, that talks in great detail about us knowing what we know about God from both the scriptural and natural records. And of course that's true, isn't it? Okay. So that's some terminology. I meant to get through that a little quicker, but that's some terminology that is going to come in useful as we describe these four views of the when and how of creation. Okay, there's evolutionary creationism, old earth creationism, young earth creationism, and intelligent design. You may have heard of some of those. You may ascribe to one of these, whether you even know to call it that or not. Okay, and we're going to unpack those very briefly. Any questions so far? Okay. Evolutionary creationism. The leading proponent of this theory, they're all theories. The leading proponent of this is a Deborah Harzma. She's former president of the BioLogos Foundation, authored several books. I wanted to give some books as references so that you could go and check some of this stuff out firsthand and make up your own mind. By the way, I'm not going to convince you of any four of these. We're just going to unpack them so you can make your own decisions and kind of know better what the questions are. But she has written so many books I couldn't list them. So just Google her name and you can go find stuff. Okay. Her position, their position, evolutionary creationists, is that God created the universe about 13.8 billion years ago. Okay, and the Earth about 4.5 billion years ago. He created humanity over maybe billions of years, carefully, deliberately, using incremental changes such as mutations throughout the process. Okay? The stated position that evolution is by chance, but God sets the conditions for that chance. I don't know what that means. I don't mean to badmouth it. I just don't know what that means. But that is their stated position. Their position is that there may or may not have been Adam and Eve. Okay, now you could talk about any number of important things that are important when you're figuring out the history of God and man, and how He created them and their environment and so forth. Okay, but let's just pick on that one. Was there a literal historic figure of Adam and Eve? Okay, they're undecided. Okay. This to me is important. The human scribes of the scriptures were limited to the knowledge of the cultures of their time. In other words, there was no supernatural, no transcendent provision of information. that informed what they might have written. They only had what their cultures knew. My interpretation, now, that's them. As carefully as I might paraphrase, but as objectively as I could. Down here, my interpretation of that, this is my finding, you don't have to agree with it, is that they would say, trust the scriptural record only to the degree it's consistent with the physical record, with the natural record. That transcendency is possible, given that, but we should favor any storyline that doesn't depend on it. To me, a lot of this smacks of deism, or theism, I think, where God set things in motion and sat back and watched, okay, or that it doesn't have emotion, he doesn't interact with us, that sort of thing. He did cause it all, but that's all. To me, a lot of this smacks of that, and this, of course, gets at the scriptures not being necessarily inspired by God. Okay, so the bottom line, on my view.
Yeah, I just have a question
Please.
on that. So she's whoever goes with this is basically saying that the physical record is more important than the scriptural record, as far as.
Say that again.
They're saying basically that the physical record is more trustworthy than the scriptural record.
They don't say that. They emphatically deny that. But I look at how they talk and what they do, and I sure get that impression. You may or may not. Okay? And I'll give you some resources later so you can go check it out yourself. Old Earth creationism. Leading proponent of this is a PhD named Hugh Ross. He founded Reasons to Believe, that's the organization, and he authored this book, More Than a Theory. It's a page turner. It's heavy, it's thick. I will have to read it again to really get it. But he believes that God created the universe over 13.7 billion years ago, and the Earth about 5 billion. Very similar, right? So I don't read anything into this, but it happens that the evolutionary creation and the old Earth creation share the same view of the timeline. Okay, with the exception though that the old Earth folks believe he created mankind no more than 100,000 years ago, and more likely about 50,000 years ago. Okay, and that he spent those billions of years before the thousands of years or tens of thousands preparing the universe to support humanity. All of it. I could see how I see how we interact with our solar system, how it affects us, maybe the Milky Way. No, the whole universe. And by the way, all of these are perfectly compatible with the Big Bang of some kind, somehow, some way, sometime. Okay, even all the creation theories. Okay, some people say, "Oh, I believe in the Big Bang." Okay, fine. Well, let's have the rest of the conversation. You know, that's true of all of them. Okay. This is the tricky part for me. Just hold this thought. It claims that there are sound ways to interpret Genesis other than we normally do. Okay? I'll come back to that. There was an Adam and Eve. They have no question about that. It's just how long ago did God create them? Out of dust. Deliberately. Not evolving. Okay? The question is how long ago, not that they lived. They were historical figures then. Okay? And this book describes a, quote, self-correcting recreation model based on an interpretation of Scripture that is scientifically testable. What Ross did is he looked at what the Scripture says through a particular interpretation lens that is not maybe what ours is. For instance, the 6 days of creation were not 6 literal days. He claims there's a different way to read those words. I'm going to hold that thought. come back to them, okay? But he starts with the Bible. A particular way of reading the Bible on a number of points. And then built a scientific model that's testable and adjustable, okay? And when you test it and you find out, oh, that didn't go like I thought it would, he fixes the model, okay, without departing from the interpretation of Scripture that he started from. What I think that says is, trust both the scriptural and natural records. This may require you to question your previous interpretation of some Scripture. Transcendency happens, but God tends to follow the rules he established. The bottom line is that it is scientific and is potentially biblical, if you can get your brain around the particular interpretation he suggests. I'm going to come back to that. Young Earth creationism. A guy named Ken Ham. I mentioned that he debated Bill Nye. That's not important, but it's a famous debate. And if you had ever heard of or seen that debate, this is the guy. That's the only reason I mention it. Okay? And he says that God created the universe, the earth, and mankind about 6,000 years ago. Okay? Basically takes the 6 days literally, takes the plausible human lifespan and takes the generations from Adam to Moses to David to Jesus and so forth, add on another 2,000 years and you come up with that figure. Okay? It's taking the plain meaning that we're used to doing of Genesis. The natural record, so how do you explain all the natural evidence? Ross, the old Earth guy, he says that there's virtually no scientific evidence, archaeological evidence, but not natural evidence that this is what happened. And that there's tons of natural evidence that this is what happened. That's unsettling for me. I'm going to come back to it. Okay. So Ham would have us say, my words, trust the scriptural record regardless of what the natural record seems to tell you. Transcendency occurs whenever and however God desires. That's true, of course. My view. Okay? And so it's basically follow the scripture, use the plainest reading of it, and when it comes to where'd the dinosaurs go and what's up with that? Or
he says the flood.
I'm sorry?
He says the flood.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. So that's kind of plausible, I suppose. I haven't thought it through scientifically. Mm-hmm. But okay, that's enough to satisfy me, but it doesn't prepare me to have a discussion, right? Okay, and that's kind of the key thing here. Anyway, so it's basically don't believe your lying eyes, because the natural record is corrupted because sin has affected all of creation. There's some truth in that. Is it true enough to go down this road? Well, apparently so, because I've lived most of my life here. Okay? Finally, there's intelligent design. Leading proponent for this is Stephen Meyer, a founder of the Center for Science and Culture, the Discovery Institute. He authored Return of the God Hypothesis. What intelligent design does, notice that it has theists and non-theists, atheists, whatever, agnostics, contributing to it. They don't have a position officially, corporately, collectively, on God, okay, on spirituality at all, okay? But they do say something caused all this, okay? Because you cannot get beyond something called irreducible complexity, okay? Their term. Some of you are familiar with it. Connie, would you please pause the thing?
Really interesting discoveries that have been occurring in biochemistry and cell biology over the last 2 or 3 decades.
Yeah.
And what what biologists, molecular biologists, cell biologists, microbiologists have been discovering is that at the level of individual cells.
Hang on. So for the folks out there in Cyberland, we just watched Stephen Meyer's video of talking about the flagellum and the complex motor that's inside it, just at the bacterium level. And it's just a great demonstration or proof of irreducible, I shouldn't say proof, should I? Talking about irreducible complexity. And it just really, frankly, refutes evolution. Not just that video, that's just one of, I don't know how many things they've done. My interpretation of this position is that what they're saying, without any help from the Bible, okay, because remember, this is not a religious organization, although there's many great Christians, including Meyer, who are involved in it, Christian scientists who are Christian. So there are non-theists involved, okay? So they don't depend on the Bible. They don't even consider it, quite frankly. They're saying that the natural record itself refutes evolution. And I'm inclined to agree with them, frankly. So it's extra biblical, not unbiblical or it's extra biblical for a purpose and totally scientific. And so when you take these four positions, and by the way, these four positions are in a book here. I can refer you to this. It's called Creation, Evolution, and Intelligent Design. An editor took all four of those people and allowed them to represent their positions in here alongside each other. And then they did a debate where person A put something out, persons B, C, and D countered it, and so forth. And they did that in turn. And it's just a great laydown of all four of these things. Now, having said all that, let me explain this here. I believe personally, and I've talked to a few folks who are PhDs, frankly, who have really internalized a lot on this topic. And they agree with me that intelligent design, even though it's considered by many to be a fourth theory, is not one. It's simply a refutation of this one, and fully supports either of these equally. Okay, so let's just set that aside, and in so doing, if I may, set evolutionary creationism aside. You may hold that view. You may hold that view. I'm not poo-pooing you if you do, okay? But I want to recount for you now what my journey's been in this, and I've never gone here, and I think for good reason myself, okay? And so the real question is, which of these two, my question, is which of these two depend on the scriptural record and or the natural record? And this is kind of my cartoon level take of that, is that the natural record really supports old earth creationism. Does the scripture? I don't know yet. That's why this is kind of blackened out here and it fades pretty quick. That's just me and just at the moment, okay? Young earth creationism is, I'm convinced, I have been for almost my entire life, that's supported by the scriptural record. Even before I was a Christian, I believe that. But it's the position of old earth creationism, and I'm not prepared to counter it, that there's very little in the natural record that supports young earth creationism. Questions on that? I'm not convinced of either of them yet, okay? I'm in transition. Very sorry for the technical difficulties. We're getting close to the end. So here's where I'm at. I have always been a young earth creationist. Okay? I thought 6 days meant 6 days. I thought the begats meant so-and-so fathered so-and-so who fathered the next guy, and you go through the genealogy from Adam to Christ. Okay, each person named is one generation away from the person that was listed before. Okay, that doesn't work with old creationism. Neither does. Okay, so what makes me consider old Earth creationism? One is when they make the point, God and His Word are not suspect. What's suspect is my interpretation of that word. They say I've been reading the Bible wrong. They don't say the Bible's wrong. To me, I have to take a knee and be humble and confess that possibility. Okay, that opens the door a crack for me to old Earth creationists. Okay, second, the scriptures point to examination of the natural record. The heavens declare. Okay, and there's so many other scriptures. Okay, that verses where passages, sometimes whole chapters, where it's basically saying, look around you. Look at the, so to speak, natural record. Why would God, if He inspired the Word, I believe He did, tell us to examine something that's false evidence? Okay? Why would He do that? He could, couldn't He? He could manufacture evidence. He could say that Earth from that sun millions of light years away, that light hasn't been coming that long. It's only been coming 6,000 years, okay? And what He did was, God made the light already halfway here. That's what I've been thinking for decades. He could do that, couldn't He? But why would He point to it and say, look at that? It's too much of a logical leap for me. That creates a dilemma for me. Okay. There seemed to be, and this is Roth's assertion, and I apologize. This is the one sentence in this whole presentation that if I could spend 3 more hours, I'd spend it here. We don't have the time. But he goes to great lengths to talk about how there's even more scripture supporting old Earth creationism than there is young. I'm going to take that assumption at face value and deal with it for now. And so here's where my questions are going to start. One of the things he says is that when Genesis describes 6 days of creation, that there is an alternative, one way of interpreting that Hebrew word yom, that's where we get Yom Kippur, right? One way of interpreting yom is that it's a literal dawn to dusk period. Okay, it's a literal 24 hours. Another interpretation, he says, in my words, is that it's an era. It's a finite period of some undetermined length. Think of it like an era. Okay, and that those days aren't necessarily in sequence, as it lists the 6 days. They could be a thematic or functional layout, and or they don't have to be consecutive days, yoms. I have trouble with that, but I'm going to study this Hebrew word. I haven't yet. I'm open to the possibility. That's where I'm at. Another one is the begats. Rather than saying person B is person A's immediate son. Okay? There's Ross says that there's a way to read begat. The Hebrew word is yalad. That where it's simply that B is descended from A. There could be some number of generations in between. Now we know that's not the case with some of those relationships. We know that Isaac was Abraham's son, for example, right? So there's some of those. where we know it's just one generation. But can there be? So I'm going to investigate the meaning of that word, and I want to go through and see, is there anywhere where it really ties this parent-child direct descendant relationship in every case in the genealogy from Adam to Christ. If there's even one gap, I'll consider this. I'll consider the old earth thing. So, bottom line is, and this is very important, my faith in my interpretation of the Bible is really rattled right now. If I've been reading Genesis 1 wrong, what else have I been reading wrong? What else do I take figuratively, if you will, or as poetry, or something, or imprecise, that I've been taking as precise and literal and so forth? Okay, I'm really rattled right now. I'm in a little bit of a crisis, but it's only a small crisis. I don't mind being having decreased confidence in my ability to read Scripture. I refuse to decrease my confidence in who He is, and that His Word is true, that His Word is trustworthy. Okay. In fact, the precision that Ross describes in the billions years long preparation of the universe for little or less. The whole universe, that everything serves a purpose. The farthest flung galaxy might exist because it had to contribute gases or contribute to the chemistry that had to end up on Earth. Besides just the hydrogen, I think it is, that most people, Christians and non-alike, creationists and non-alike, say was really what this stuff was at the Big Bang, right? And so how all the other elements came into being and so forth. My confidence in Him and His Word has actually increased dramatically as a result of this. The price I'm paying is I trust myself less. Does that make sense? I owe you an update. When I figure this out for myself, which I may not conclusively, I don't expect to come to a conclusion on this, but I must investigate. I must apply rigor to this, and I'll let you know how that turns out. Fair enough? So, back to our learning objectives. Now I went way over time, I'm sorry. This doesn't happen to work. I gave a presentation today, and I planned for it to take 10 minutes, and it took 9 minutes. So why didn't that I guess I'm more passionate about this. Maybe that's what's going on. Okay. So anyway, can you list some theories for how and when the universe, Earth, and humanity were created?
Well, there's old Earth and young Earth.
Yes.
Evolutionary creation, isn't
Yes. One more.
Intelligent
Yes.
design.
Intelligent design.
Yeah.
Which I think is a bad apple among the oranges. You decide.
It more like complements the old and the young. It's not really an actual.
I believe so. And this can all be part of the conversation when you talk to people, right? Well, there's this, not so much, and anyway. Can you list some principles and terminology that you might use when talking to a critical thinker about these things?
Open, closed, and isolated systems.
That's one.
Mm-hmm.
How about the physical and metaphysical realms? How about direct and indirect
Evidence.
How about things that are transcendent or
Non-trans.
non-transcendent? Okay, you don't have to get all of them. By the way, I could have added 20 more. We'd be here at midnight if I did. Okay, what are your thoughts on any of this? No wrong answers. Have you heard it before? Have you thought it before? Did you learn something new? Anything?
New Earth and Old Earth, I've always I understand that either one could be right, and whichever the side I were to pick, I understand that it could be the other. But that doesn't make much difference to me. I still believe that God created it.
Mm-hmm.
How long it took him, or
when it happened.
yeah,
Doesn't really matter.
to me that much.
Yeah, that's the important thing, that God created it.
All this stuff is not correct. What is an essential, right, is that he did it. He did it for his glory. Whether the timing and the method, he's capable of any of them. In a certain way, they're all equally glorious, in a certain sense, or all sufficiently glorious, right? To their credit, even though I think some of these people are nuts, to their credit, they all say emphatically and in unison with one another that this stuff is non-essential. Okay? What's important is that God did it.
Yeah.
Okay? That is the essential. And to their great credit, they all say that. But I think this is all very important, and it's increasingly important. I don't know if you agree. When you're talking to people who are critical thinkers, people who come from who are scientists or have been influenced by scientists, people who are working a technical or mathematical, a STEM they call it, science, technology, engineering, math and medicine. There's 2 M's now. Field. Speaking their language, having the patience to really communicate and try to exchange ideas rather than simply win an argument, I think might get you a hearing. Does that make sense? Okay, thanks. Any other questions, comments?
I particularly like the position that we've just been interpreting it incorrectly. We have the words, but perhaps language usage has changed or whatever. It's always bothered me to, because up to now, this, I'm willing to consider it, but it's always bothered me that Scripture says that, and morning and evening, or evening and morning were the first day. And I'm thinking, but a day is one rotation of the earth relative to the sun. Well, the sun wasn't created till day 4, so that's always bothered me.
Right.
Yeah.
So I would like to pursue that whole theory a little bit more.
Yeah, an example Ross brings out, and by the way, the groups of people that hold these 4 positions aren't monoliths. There's variance of opinion inside them, okay?
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily Ross, but many old earthers say that, and they kind of get at that, and they say that the 6 days are more functional than chronological, okay? So it kind of makes them even more symbolic than Ross might be suggesting. That bothers me, but, and so in the first 3 days, he created different parts of the environment, earth, land, sea, earth, air, etc. And then on the corresponding day, like if you created, I think it's land or the oceans on the first day, right? Let's say it's the oceans.
So.
I could be wrong. Then
Separated
on the 4th
the sky
day,
from the oceans.
on the 4th day, he created fish. And if he parted the air, parted the sea from the, the firmament and so forth, okay, then he on the corresponding day, 3 days later, whatever that is, he created birds and so forth. And so there's this functional, logical layout as opposed to chronological. Who knows? You're keeping those. Making sure it's not the dial.
It wasn't the glass.
It
And-
fell over but didn't break.
Whoa! It isn't upright. Okay.
The towel is over there on the
Yeah.
chair.
We could be done. Thank you very much. I really, really appreciate your time.